This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you, Pat. Call to order this meeting of the Tampa Bay Estuary Program Policy Board. Let's do roll call. Steph. Here.
Commissioner Michael Holt.
Here.
Commissioner Nathan Good.
Here.
Commissioner Marion. Colleen Weaver, four. Councilmember Councilmember Ed Mazzanoni.
Here.
Here. Councilmember Kathleen Kevin. Here. Pamela Vasquez, four. District Director Ken Bowman. Here. Tom DeVille.
Here.
Before we go into the agenda, we have several new members. Quite frankly, I lost track of who's new. Fill out a turnover on the board after the last segment. If we could go, introduce yourself and say a few words, and if you would, Ed, start us off.
I'm representing South Florida Range District.
Thank you, Ed. Jason?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jason Bearden. I'm the County County Commissioner. Happy to be here.
Appreciate it, Commissioner. Kathy?
If I could just ask everyone to speak directly into the mic so that, particularly everything can fit the mic in here, we appreciate it. No.
Lynn Mercat, Tampa City.
Senior.
Colleen Weaver, standing in today for Commissioner Marion. Pamela Vasquez.
And I'm Michael King. Commissioner for District 4, West District, for County. Places it's speaking to the bill, but I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. My name is Charlie Justice. I'm on the Pinellas County Commission, and I think I'm in my 9th or 10th year on the Estuary Board. So glad to have all new faces and exciting new voices, and appreciate you participating. And when we get to the staff report, we'll go through and introduce all the new staff. There is no changes to the agenda. Item number 2, approval of the minutes from the last policy board meeting on adjustments or motion to approve. A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Show it passing unanimously. Do we have any general citizens comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 4, our policy board chair and vice chair election. At this time, I will turn the gavel over to Ed.
Yeah, as part of the district bylaws, chair for a vacancy, vice chair, for December, we will now open the elect. So I'd like to open up the nominee for chair to start. Any other nominee? You accept? Any other nominee? Close the nominations and then vote. Is there a motion to elect Mr. Charlie Justice as chair of the Tampa Bay Estuary Board? Discussion? Hearing none, call to the question. All those in favor, say aye. Those opposed? For another 2 years, or
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's a great board to be on. As you know, the new members will learn, and a great staff to work with, and so hopefully in 2 years, we'll have someone else that wants to step up and do that. We will now take nominations for vice chair. Are there nominations for vice chair? Any further nominations? Do we need a second for that? No, I don't think so. All right. We'll close the nominations. All those in favor of Commissioner Owen for vice chair, say aye. Any opposed? So it passes unanimously. Congratulations. Continue the film, so proud of you. That just means Manatee just got cut from their thunder. All right. Moving on to our action item. Item number 5, we have our annual program-wide audit report. So, are you going to pick this off?
Yeah, as a report, last year, our auditing services, substantially increased by this auditor. Due to that, we've been out to West Bids for additional audit services for fiscal year 2022 audit. This year, Rivera got selected to be an auditor. Each the primary leads in conducting this audit. My staff, Deputy Sprague Pearl, Jessica Lewis helped tremendously with the audit, and both of her young financial provider, this is my super. So we're going to provide an overview of the audit findings to you all.
Thank you, everyone, for having us today. I'm Julie Davis. I'm a shareholder with Rivera Gordimer and Company. We are a CPA firm based in Tampa, Florida, and I'm pleased to be able to work with you all this year on your audit. We got started kind of early fall on the transition process of transitioning the work from your prior firm and really getting going on our audit in mid-December timeframe. We worked with the team at CRI in completing all the audit work and getting everything completed, as well as your team here at the Estuary Program, Stephanie, Jessica, Ed, everybody else that's been involved. It takes a lot of work to get through the audit process, a lot of documentation to provide to us, a lot of questions, especially as a new auditor, getting to know you all. And I just really want to thank everybody for their time and efforts in having us here today on time and on schedule for you all. So with that, I want to kind of quickly go over some of our highlights of our reports. So I'm going to skip ahead to page 1, which is our audit results. And we're pleased to report today an unmodified opinion on your financial statements. And what that means is it's a clean opinion and that any user of your financial statements can rely on them to make an informed decision. Majority of your users are your citizens, your constituents, grantors, things of that nature that rely on your financial statements. And it's a clean opinion for them all to rely on them. As I mentioned earlier, we received full cooperation from everyone involved in the audit process. It was a very smooth process from our end as well, and everything was provided completely and accurately, and we had no disagreements on any accounting matters that arose through the process. Our responsibilities for the audit was in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards, which means our objective was to provide an opinion on your financial statements that they are fairly presented. Our objective is to provide reasonable assurance, not absolute assurance, that your financial statements are free of material misstatement. And what that really means is that we don't look at every transaction that occurs throughout the year. We use a lot of risk-based auditing approaches, sampling, looking at high-risk areas, things of that nature during our audit to focus our time and efforts on things that truly, I would say, truly matter to the organization. We also conducted our audit in accordance with government auditing standards, which means that we look at compliance with laws, rules, regulations, and we're pleased to report that there were no findings in that as well. We had additional responsibilities as well, so a lot of different auditing standards that we have to follow for your organization. The last one that we do is uniform guidance, which is a single audit on your grant funding. So this is where we take a deep dive into certain grant fundings and test specific compliance requirements with those grants. This year, your major program was the National Estuary Program, which is your largest federal source, and this year was about $560,000 of expenses that we tested for that program. And then moving on to the next page. As part of our audit, we do look at internal controls. The objective of our audit is not to provide an opinion on internal controls, but we do test internal controls to the extent necessary to render our opinion. And we're pleased to report that there were no material weaknesses noted during our audit process. And then listed there are several other reports and schedules that summarize all of our findings, whether it's a single audit, government auditing standards, regular audit opinion, they're all listed in your financial statements. Lots of good reading if you need help falling asleep tonight. And then on page 4 here, moving on, is we're required to communicate with you all certain matters throughout the audit process. You all as a governing board technically hire us as your firm, and we're here to report to you all any of our findings. One of the things that we're required to communicate with you all is management judgments and accounting estimates. These are the significant estimates that we identified that are in your financial statements. Estimates are inherent in every financial statement. It's nothing unique to your organization, but the ones that we deem most significant for this particular organization is the allowance for doubtful accounts, the FRS actuarial assumptions, and the fair value of investments. And we concluded that all the estimates are reasonable in the circumstances. And then moving on is our page of other matters. This is all the other things that we're required to report to you all as the governing board. And we're pleased to report that there were no illegal acts and no fraud noted during our audit process. This year, there was a new accounting standard that was implemented, GASB 87. As many of you all serve on other boards, you're probably going to start hearing this a lot. It's the big impact this year on all governments. And really what this is doing is putting leases on the balance sheets now, if you think of it that way. Much like in private practice, those are going on as well. The GASB and FASB, so for-profit as well as government, they're aligning now, and those standards are being implemented. And then the impact on your financial statement this year was about $182,000 of an asset and related liability for the leases. Significant disclosures, there is a prior period restatement. This goes way back to, I believe, 2017. There was a system conversion. Some old liabilities never got cleared out, and so this was the year we felt that it was the right time to clean it up and make sure that all your books and records are complete and accurate. And so management proposed that to us as part of the audit process, and we concurred with their findings as well. And with that, there's no other audit findings, no uncorrected misstatements, and no other matters to report to you all. So this is the page that if there's anything significant, you would have already heard from us. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Elise, who's a supervisor in our office, and she's going to go over some of the highlights of the numbers for you.
Thanks, Julie. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Elise Leach, and I'm an audit supervisor with Rivera Gordimer, and I'm briefly going to go over the financial statements with you. So starting off looking at assets, you'll see that unrestricted cash and investments increased over prior year. This is due to the collection of receivables before year end and an increase in net income. And then you'll also see the right to use asset. As Julie mentioned, this is the GASB 87 implementation. Looking at liabilities, oops, I accidentally scrolled on this computer. Looking at liabilities, you'll see that there's that lease liability associated with the GASB 87 implementation. And there's also a change in the net pension liability. This is due to the actuarial data of the plan from prior year. This fluctuates from year to year, which takes us to our change in net position of about $259,000. Moving on to the statement of activities. There we go. You'll see that there was a slight decrease in revenue over prior year. This is just due to contracts from 2019 and 2020 ending, but this was mainly offset by an additional grant from the National Estuary Program. And then as total revenues decreased, so did total expenses, which this is mainly due to consulting and contracting services associated with Piney Point, which also leads us to the change in net position of about $259,000. Since this is a very brief, very high level overview of the financial statements, does anybody have any questions about them? Okay, great.
Well, thank you all again for having us today. We're very pleased to be here to issue a clean audit report on the financials. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us and we'll be happy to answer them for you.
Thank you. All right, so we're moving to accept. Second, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? So it passes unanimously. Thank you all very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, just wanted to thank you for putting on this beginning in the definitely want to thank my staff as well. They're helping. Burns or Saturday that started in early December, quickly came with the word and helped out with audit and just very much appreciate that.
Great job. Item number 6, quarterly financial report, Mr. Schroeder.
Moving on to page 10 in your packet is our October 1, 2022, December 31st last year. So a couple of things to highlight. In total, both revenues and expenses are about at the 11% level. Typically, for that first report would be about 25%. But our expectation of some larger projects looking out over the tail of the year, we're probably there was probably quarter straight into work, so probably may have both those revenues and expenses for the latter part of this year. The other thing to note on this financial report is that federal dollar zero past quarter. Basically, we draw down until after the quarter ended, so just indicating receive some federal revenue. Other things to note in terms of revenue, it see an increase in terms of donations to the program that we really anticipated when we developed the budget back in August of last year. So it's good to use those donations to help fund our Bay grant, Bay Environmental Restoration Grant Program. And last thing to note on the revenue side, in terms of membership dues, we're now at the point this quarter we have collected all the expected. Just one more building automatic district that occurs for this meeting, but at that time we revenues. On the expense side, fairly typical across the board in terms of being that 25% level, as I mentioned. The two items that are booked, we see usage and training of our state of the we didn't anticipate this current fiscal year, but it was basically over the last fiscal year in a rerun. Say that they were 10 months for a local Florida State delegation. So we're just incurring those expenses this fiscal year. The next board meeting, did your budget amendment to cover those expenses from grants and associated costs. Same thing you said before, I think the audit services back in August, we anticipated about 21,000 in auditing services this fiscal year. That those services. That's why we need to look at it. So just want to make these expenses, but fairly typical revenue. I think it's a really safe. Questions that you all have?
Your motion to accept. We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? So it passes unanimously. Item number 7, draft EPA work plan. Mr. Schroeder.
Yeah, this item started on page 11 in your packet and links within that agenda item. This is the basis of our core operating costs for the estuary programs. This is our national estuary program. We apply for, we use EPA water, we sponsor match with the mentioned, and we're required to match these federal dollars 50. So these shortfalls and members needs are made of kind project. This year we had some good news. We saw an increase in appropriations to the 1820 national program. We invest with federal dollar $850,000. Matched with interlocal agreements, 630,755 in total. In fact, project is requested in the amount of $240,055. To talk to you all during the week about your ideas for projects that would be completed. We're at October 123. September 4. I've gotten some good departments so far. Finalized with the final project would be to make up $50 million. And the final work plan that will present to you all maybe. But in the interim of presenting the strategy to give you the idea of what staff have so far. So if you go into the packet on page 54, under table 2C4, the full outline of description on the funding sources Treasury program anticipated for fiscal year 2024. As I mentioned, $850 in federal dollars, matched with the locals for this both cash and in kind, bring the total grant up to $1.7 million for operating expenses as well as communication. Other thing to note, and this is something that we have done prior board direction, was to reserve $25,000 of the cash from our non-federal sources into the reserve account. And that helps us match additional federal grants in the future, as well as the board's direction to allow that reserve to cover at least 1 year operation entry program. If for some reason federal appropriation. Right now, our reserve fund is about 4,000, so it's about half a year. So we're still in the fund this year. Moving on to the next page, page 55. PC5. These are actually the proposed expenses using the $100 we're planning funding. As I mentioned, we cover the majority of operating costs with these combined dollars. Under section 1, it outlines the core operating costs of the program. You'll see footnoting that our personnel salary grid is actually slightly other external grants and continuing grants that we have as a program. So this fiscal year, we're anticipating covering the total salary and career cost of about $330,000 extra. Like that's the only that's specified. Our contracted administrative services are also listed there, and total our program operations and the remainder, which, as I mentioned, we try to utilize towards technical and communication education projects that have a benefit to you all and all today. Those projects are listed under section 4 or 5 of that table. Section 4 contract technical projects. Big ones I just want to highlight some new work that we're anticipating. We analyze either restoration efforts, or oyster restoration, portions of the watershed that's listed under the Tampa Bay Habitat Management Plan implementation. So we're earmarking that $104,000 towards oyster restoration or other projects that happen as we've been in preliminary conversation with Manatee County. Some of their anticipated work to do some significant oyster restoration and secure at this time. The other big one I mentioned, this comes at the beginning of us developing a regional storage document that specifies the nutrient loading that will keep things on track in terms of the water quality conditions for the seagrass. We've seen some shortfalls in terms of seagrass coverage as of late, which we've seen recent news stories about that. So the work that we're envisioning, particularly in the Tampa Bay section, I understand what the budget for that basin might be. And that might require an adjustment to what's called the minimum capacity or the TMDL for that segment. That we're earmarking about $115,000 that for square foot. We'll be presenting a lot of this information at next week's Tampa Bay Natural Management Consortium, which is a larger group of bureau governments as well as the broader governments represented in the Tampa Bay watershed as well as private industry. Those are specific entities that have permitted load responsibility in Tampa Bay. That will be discussing sort of these next steps and actions and what we need to do to rate the force for the Tampa Bay area based on current conditions. On the outreach and education projects, we typically have a Day volunteer events that we fund routinely each year. We're also starting up some new parental education programs to really develop community members, getting out on the bay, experiencing public, investing so much dollars in trying to collect the bay, really focus on communities that don't really have those opportunities to get out on the water or get into the woods to experience all of the natural splendor that is in the waters. Also dedicating a resources to continuing messaging on the quarterly survey or programs that we have as a program. We let the community know that we have resources for community projects and or this is significant research that should be interested in funding the industry program. They'll have a benefit for them. So in total, those technical and community outreach and education projects are a little bit over $500,000, $162,000 projects. So we do this sort of plan. That is the core of what we will submit to EPA later this summer. As I mentioned, we're presenting this to you all as a conceptual plan right now. There's opportunity to speak with each of the partners and make some adjustments between now and the next board meeting in May. At that time, we would finalize the plan and then hopefully ask for your approval to submit to EPA. Also wanted to mention within the body of the SPRIT plan is a description of the funding that we receive as the NEP for the bipartisan infrastructure law funding. Just wanted to mention that we actually received the first 2 years of funding earlier this week on Valentine's Day. It's a great gift that is to the tune of a little bit over, I think, 1.6 million. Keep all the numbers. Those projects that were selected for those first 2, the funding were focused on Tidal Creek restoration in Manatee County, 2 creeks in Pinellas County, and St. One in Pinellas County, City of St. Pete, another project in the Hillsborough County. So when we finalize this, we would also like to get an idea for the next bill funding that we would need to spend later this year. Yeah, that would total a little bit over $900,000 budgets. That's year 3. Right now, the 2 restoration themes that were approved by the board last May involve Tidal Creek restoration and or directing research to aging infrastructure issues that we're facing in the community. So please get with us. We've had some draft concepts in our prior discussions with partners. We want to finalize what these projects might be for that bill so that we can submit this as a long-term strategy for that. Also, just want to mention, if you also highlight all the other grant programs that we administer, restoration fund, to use separate funding sources to drive restoration, research activity across the island, as well as research program funding that we've been able to acquire. Those projects were also highlighted in this one. So with that, it's a real general overview of about 90 pages of work plan document that we've been for funding as a national energy program. If you have any questions you might have, like I said, this is a draft concept right now, and there's updates and finalization by the if you have any questions that you might have.
As you can see, we stay busy. Other questions? Other questions? I think the experiential learning, I think, is really going to be exciting. In my previous life, I was at the university, and we took college students out in the water on the bay. For some of them, it's the first time they've been on the water in their entire life, and they grew up here. And so connecting to some of these communities, I think that's going to be a really incredible experience for everyone. Are there questions, Phil? Yes, sir.
The 25,000 reserve, how's that determined? I just talked about the prior one.
Yeah, that we probably have.
A lot of folks I know increasing the reserves, so I didn't know if that.
Yeah, they're trying to balance what we would pull the reserve, but we operating. That's right.
Yeah, that's right. Prior to about works of the EPC, we wear 2 hats in Hillsborough County, and I went out and toured the waters in the Iowa life, and it's really eye-opening and really taking a look at it and see things firsthand. So if you're a new commissioner like me, I would highly recommend to get out there on the water and really take a look.
Absolutely. Further questions or comments, or is there a motion? Yes, sir, Councilman.
Yeah, this funding is usually earmarked through some of our social marketing campaigns. And we'll continue projects that might need additional support or development fund. So in the past, we funded the deep learning and the pickup campaign. Deep learning campaigns to educate the public on the line of some pickup campaigns. I and the levels and the importance of inspecting, replacing the and without a lot of the soil units. We experienced some standards. This upcoming year, we're actually going to have some projects out that might benefit from additional social marketing campaigns related to top storing, stress fans, and how we can be better voters on the way to Texas. We're also wrapping up fresh water EPA that real family collected from various devices. Going to engage me, reduce those dollars would be dedicated to the sustaining support of our building.
Further questions, or is there a motion to accept the concept? We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? So it passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Item number 8, Executive Director staff reports.
Page 12 of your packet, just some highlights. I did want to, as I mentioned, highlight some new staff that we brought on board. Ms. Reverend Kern came on as administrative specialist in December. Also want to highlight Dr. Blake Simmons came on in early January. Another staff. While we go in, each all staff right now, so then.
Community program science.
Morning, Marcus Beck, I'm the builders.
I am Carrie Learning Waller and the library of it.
Joanne, science communication designer and creator.
Blake Simmons, environmental social scientist.
Good morning, I'm Justin Lewis, the Jill.
I'm Maya Burke, the assistant director.
Also want to highlight Olivia Clay, who's in the audience as well. She's been an intern with helping out Larry Wall. Welcome, Olivia. From our activities. Other things to highlight in the director's report, just want to make mentions. One of the main projects that we've been involved with and helped facilitate the adventure program. We call it Tampa Bay Adventure Management Authority. I mentioned this and that, public and private entities within the Tampa Bay watershed responsible permitted blue responsibilities. Okay. We've been meeting that group since the mid 1990s. And every 5 years, we develop what's called a regional document. Under the Department of Environment Protection. The challenge of this past year was in 2022, well, highlighted that 50. As I mentioned, over that 5-year period, the positive ecological conditions in the venue lost significant resources key conditions in 2016. Although we've been maintaining issues below basically regulated limits that have previously defined. That is prompting us to do some of the additional work I mentioned, that's through our next week. Particularly, where we've lost a significant amount of seagrass resources and we're actually all-time low. Seagrass numbers with that always. So that was prompting a lot of concern for the management team. You did good that track. Part of that process is really saying whether or not the nutrient diet would be adjusted. That work is started on Tampa Bay, and that might necessitate changes to allocations in these with malnutrition. So those are conversations that are usually garnered through the national feed facility. As mentioned, next week will be meeting February 22nd. Spearhead that. I just want to mention that to y'all, there is a link to the full stock. As mentioned, you provide links. If you get a really the very second rationale of that plan steps that are needed for this next 5-year period. So that will be the work that we're visiting for this. I'll pause there to see if you all have any questions. There was a request in the minute for just to get a hearing on these that we mentioned all the order. Advisory committee of the items as well as are there any questions on regional assurance?
So you mentioned
That's part of the similar action study that we're I'm what will you would be work that and right now we don't know that change. The base ecology we first developed, so those targets were limited. We know that regional temperature ecology that period persistence time. A lot of them started that curve that is like coverage for that. That is circulation. Another factor causing the stress levels. But actually load reductions that might be necessary as well as additional actions. But beyond that, similar capacity assessment help find what that need is.
So basically, we might need to load less like nitrogen to get the same kind of benefit that we did back in the 1990s. We don't know that number yet. And I'll just offer, we did put together some key messages associated with the seagrass results that we will share with you all so that you can feel confident speaking to these issues if you want to do that to your boards. But this issue that Ed is highlighting is one that's complicated from a messaging perspective for us because it's very important for the community to continue to address nitrogen pollution to the bay. But our understanding of what's going on, how the bay is responding to nitrogen pollution is complicated by these other factors. And so to point out that disconnect of we're meeting the nitrogen loads for those bay segments, but the bay is not responding in the way that we expect it to, is something that's kind of confusing to speak to. So we'll be working through how to best message that, and we'd be very interested in your feedback on what's clear or what's not clear about that, because this is sort of a new era for us as a program.
We are pretty sure it's Hillsborough's fault.
Say that.
So how do you get compliance, and so what? So how do you get buy-in, compliance? Who needs to obey? It's federal, and then that's where the money's going to come from?
Yes, so that's we're actually We remember going as well as everyone else, whatever it is, sign on to the declaration of flowers. That will help support fund for the next revolt first plan, as well as pledge your entity to commit to the process by identifying the seed.
Until we know what it tells us, we're not 100% sure what the next step would be. But back decades ago, it was the county commissions at each county putting in the fertilizer ordinances, and taking those steps. Get state buy-in to support that. So that was then, but we don't know exactly what this will do.
The historic regional ethic has been to do this proactively and voluntarily, and these kinds of efforts that we did successfully on our own as a community have been adopted into regulatory paradigm. So, we could have our hand forwards if we continue to see poor water quality conditions, or we can do the things we know we need to do to get the bay where we want to see it. And so, in many respects, the first line of defense is you all in your elected roles and the funds that you're able to appropriate for these kinds of things. And Ed has outlined some of the actions and strategies that we think are effective. That includes further reductions of nitrogen loading, addressing your stormwater controls, what opportunities you have to eliminate wastewater discharges to the bay, fertilizer ordinances. But then there are other complementary things that you can pursue, like habitat restoration projects, looking at how oysters might be able to help filter the water of the harmful algae that's causing some of these problems. We can work together as a region to see if the Florida Department of Transportation can make some of these changes to the causeways, which we think are hurting circulation in the Old Tampa Bay. So these are the kinds of things that we can work together as a region. Some of them are going to be bigger than what we can all do together, but many of them are within your.
Sure.
Fair to say that gathering more information about crazy, and that until we're able to get a higher confidence level around that, then at that point we can determine what levers make the most sense to address and mitigate.
I think we have high confidence around the root cause of nutrient pollution, and that's
broader than that. Right?
That's the lever that we have right now. If we wanted to add additional tools, I think the percentage that each one of these things is maybe responsible for producing a water quality improvement, there's less confidence around those things. So those, we would view those as sort of like win-win kind of things. Like they're good on their own, and they would probably have like an enhancing benefit for water quality. So you want to.
For upper tank bay will be on lower cortical levels. But the investments that we made in space and opportunity projects are probably realistically not achievable over even this decade. So we have to do complementary activities while we're continuing to pursue production projects to affect that expression. So we modeled just from stormwater controls alone, we reduce about 90 tons of nutrient load from stormwater in Old Tampa Bay. Which the benefit of seagrass. 90 tons of stormwater control with a lot of projects. Any one stormwater project equates to about 1,000 pounds of nitrogen reduction at best. So you're looking at 180 projects, where you do 700 projects, how do you fund the 780 projects? Is there a large regional stormwater facility that those sort of questions take out with this additional work? But we are confident that the reduction will have been big. We can also kickstart the recovery quicker. They're mature. Yeah. But we can't assign specific percentage causation right now from what we're experiencing here.
So your point.
It was a great question. It is complicated. Like I said, the base college is a lot different than the district part of it.
Grant issue that we have a lot of shoveling, a lot of wastewater treatment being from the slide each year. Is there shoveling going on in that year? There was a consultant identified an area that needed to be opened up in order to get that water movement. And basically, that shoal just pulls that water inside. You release the wastewater treatment in an emergency situation, it kills almost everything backwards in the canals of these homes. And I just didn't know if there was any kind of issue like that, if we've got a shoaling issue, because we've identified one and we're gonna have to go in and help fix that so that that water can come out and not just hang words of the shoal.
So in Upper Littleton, you have some progress that needs to investigate accumulation of water.
Okay.
So you had something. For Tampa Bay. Some of the early study attribute that to the things that are driving that. From the algae. So again, getting back to the core, started with Addison, Tampa Bay, for peaks, severe conditions in 2016, turning on the nutrient, but also help with mother.
It's cognitive function as shoals, but they're just ones that we put there on.
Yeah, we're struggling because it was a feature really a couple of years ago and increased that. We went up, so I'm still sitting up there and that was high. Nothing can get out.
Councilman?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about we're working on redoing our sewer line to prevent some of this. We've got the apple box that they're trying to take apples to grants, and we actually just got a grant from the state to do a 6-month I don't know if we truly understand the whole process, but then take out more PFAS, PFOA, nutrients before the wastewater gets put into the bay. And so I know that every community is doing different things, but I guess that's your job to figure out what each community is doing and how it all fits together. It sounds like we're doing a lot of stuff, but I know there's more that we can do, and that's here. But also just learning a little bit more about if these projects are successful. This type of information we want us to that or you've already connected with the folks who are doing that study.
Yeah, that's part of the reason starting by the updated project or mentioned over that period as well. So I mentioned that the declaration of operation obviously costs for all that will get the next event to bring into that information request so that I can get in a picture of all the projects on that will help us understand what additional things might be needed. So yes, all those the project be full and want that.
If you all thought it would be useful, we could do a little bit of roundtable sharing at these meetings, because I think part of our history too has been that we haven't been prescriptive about how you must reduce your nitrogen load. It's been a different sort of suite of options for each local government, and we trust you all to choose what's best for your respective constituents. But if you kind of shared with each other here, maybe you could get some ideas, and maybe that would be useful. And in particular, I think the study that you're talking about, the additional wastewater treatment, is something that would be of interest to other board members here, because we know that advanced wastewater treatment technology was advanced in the 1970s and the 1980s, but it's 2023, y'all. Like, we can do better, And if we can showcase, what different governments are doing to improve on that front, I would encourage that and be happy to make time for that kind of sharing here.
I would love that because obviously we all have different strengths, and I'll be honest, like learning about this has been brand new. I mean, it's fascinating, and honestly, it truly is a big part of what the city of Tampa is through, as I've realized, being on this board and then working on stormwater, wastewater issues in the city. So I think it's been truly wonderful, and I would love to hear more about it. I would love to know what other people are doing, so we can bring these back. I know another entity that's really interested is Tampa Bay Water, who did this particular project and program that the state funded for us. Hopefully we'll have some information. One of the things that we asked about that we didn't get was what is currently, what are the nitrogen, what are the levels that are currently being put out in the bay? We couldn't get an answer for that, and that was concerning. So this study should actually be able to tell us what we're already doing, our baseline, and then what we can improve upon. I would love to share that here, and if anybody else is doing that type of research, it would be great for us to learn about.
Is that nitrogen management consortium, do we each have an counterpart from our city to, like, is Rich Gardner on that? My director, okay, so I mean, there is a sharing of ideas among people who know. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so it's more of our level.
Yeah, if that would be helpful, yeah.
In language we can understand.
Right, I wouldn't bring in your technical experts if you want to. You could, just the things that you've learned about and share with each other as leaders, if that's useful.
I would recommend that if we don't already have the information, if we can find out who that other party is for our city. I mean, I don't know who ours is with member or someone. Oh, okay. But I think if all of us knew who our we could make that. I would definitely make a call next week. It's probably a good plan. I think
We send out the board, the full board to everybody.
How frequently do we meet?
It's ad hoc, but usually at least 3 times a year. It's probably going to be more this year because of all the reasons that Ed is outlining.
Sound really in depth, and I agree with what you all said. I sure would be open to, what we like to do, the commission likes it is a workshop on teams, and it allows everybody to really get together and focus on the issue. So I would just make that suggestion, but something like that, that would be outside, that would meet every month. That could be something that Spur was open to it, that we could workshop something like that with team.
Yeah, absolutely. And you all as elected officials are welcome. See, activity or meetings.
I may not be able to do this one, but I would love to know what ours, but it's they use or.
This one's to be in person
There is a remote option, so it will be recorded.
Excellent.
But I'll warn you that it's going to be in this room, and the virtual audio is problematic, so I don't want you to rely on that, so I want to be transparent.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but even just having the opportunity to just send it out really, just to have, I often listen doing other things, and it just, even if I can't hear it all, I'm just getting the gist. I think to understand would be wonderful, and I absolutely love the workshop.
We learn a loud way of interjecting ourselves in the conversation. So,
Yeah, there's quite a few, like, put something in the room that, I'm not learning on time.
TDP solicitor is a one of the utilities meeting as well. We just had. We share the technical level across the county, so they are talking about projects. Our topic for January was, we just came through Ian and Nicole, and our municipalities did really well, so we wanted to match what they've done since 2016, what improvements, and did they help in these storms? So we had a very robust discussion. So it's being shared at a technical level every quarter. So we share successes and things that we've learned. And that's been very important for that. So they're doing it. They are doing it on a regular basis.
Very good. Any further?
Really happy to hear this level, because as you know, we do have some work to do with the rate, so great to hear you're going to work as you can with that period. Other things I just want to mention, and the director report, there's other discussion on that. Just want to make mention that we will be going through our program that I would get for every 5 year. The mentors with us receiving federal funding budget programs. This is every 5 year evaluation involves Washington DC, as well as region program for EPA and a national mastery program director. They serve as a release. It's a bit attached to the first outline activities that we pursue the federal funding the past 5 years. They'll evaluate that at the site visit. Schedule on advisory committee meeting. They'll provide themselves back to them in terms of whether or not we're making adequate process progress in terms of or so just want to make mention to that to y'all, but that's going on as well for us as a program this year. And I just wanted to make mention that we currently have the Tampa Bay Environmental Restoration Fund. These are additional resources that come from public and private dollars to help support research, restoration, other activities that have been. So please view that as a potential funding source to catalyze activity possibly stormwater, wastewater controls within the region, involved in priority projects, water from the activity. Those proposals are due March 15th for the corner. Just released a webinar and by about 50 or so books. So hopefully a lot of the books that are participating in considering applying for that this year. Do you have two other days to provide just to let them know about the ROI documents?
Sure. So usually we have notice to know about the document, like especially for each of the. It shows you what a great investment the membership are to the general agreement for the 10-year. Some of the highlights on the back of it, there's some project highlights. Some of those may include PFAS, depending on which entity you represent. So Councilmember Kotak was very friendly, as you mentioned that. If you have any questions about those, you just let and I know.
Just make possible. And I know we've talked with several of you already. If there's any interest of me, my staff attending your board meetings to present on our activities, happen to be so. Make that offer each and every year we provide this information. But I see you there, we give you an update on some volunteer leads that are.
We know that our delivery to the season will be done. So for the week, we are moving to the tour events, update on the events, so this is another arts and preserves around the water center. So during these events, volunteers are picking up trash or removing invasive species, or sometimes we do some species plantings.
So our next event is on February 25th at Tom Bennett Park in Kansas County. About 4,000 plants that need to go on the ground. So if your day is available and you want to put in some sweat equity, please invite your friends, invite your family, come out to these events. All of our upcoming events are on our website. All of the sections. And if you have, or your staff have restoration projects that need volunteer support, please let me know how we can partner.
Yeah, Robert.
I wanted to piggyback on what Ed said. After the state of the day, after we got those reports that did happen from the council to a quick 10-minute presentation, it was very useful to keep everybody up. But I want to go back to the issues and what you're talking about, principal. I don't see the highlighting of these issues coming through our municipality. If there isn't already the sharing of this information with our communications department or even with us, I would love that because I would share it with my Instagram followers, or my Facebook people, or it would be beneficial just to know about it for ourselves and then to encourage our communications team, especially with behavior change. We have so many new people moving to this area that do not understand fertilizer rates. In fact, I would suggest that even people who knew about them back in the day, crop, because it's just not still in good times. So I would love to encourage my communications team and share it myself.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like we do better in to you all as what. So we do work with each part of the staff and as doing something. We actually last year when we implemented the first time was recommendations that were originally adopted by other people. So we usually had 2 new billboards off 275. So we'd be happy to work with all that apply on this.
It's also a good reminder for us to all follow social media, or follow the estuaries link there and share as their tab puts out information. That's good stuff. Yes, sir. And when I go in the parking lot, this time versus next time, there should be a lot more estuary license plates, right? Right?
That includes the
Item number 9, under discussion items, Tampa Bay Economic Value Study update. Please have it on 5.
quick intro. We would like council is helping us update the last study that's going to go to people. So they're part of some new open transparent methodologies to come up with this new evaluation. And just stop there.
Yeah, you can stop sharing. Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much for that introduction.
My name's Alana Todd, the environmental planner here at the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, and I'm joined by my colleague Harry Walsh. He's our economic development planner. And like Ed said, we're going to be presenting on the results of our economic valuation study. So I wanted to kick off by just highlighting some of the ways in which Tampa Bay produces value for our region. And in an economic sense, the value that we directly measure comes from the marketable goods and services tied to industry production and different distribution processes. And then we also get a lot of value from employment in those industries. The Bay is also really valuable for the amenities and the cultural services that it provides, such as the view shed, and that's reflected in our property values. And then even when we're not directly using the resources of Tampa Bay, we're still benefiting from the other services that its ecosystems continue to provide in its everyday functions, like capturing carbon through photosynthesis and removing the pollutants from the water. And so all of those can be difficult to quantify. But for the last year, the TBRPC has analyzed several of them in a project funded by the Tampa Bay Environmental Restoration Fund. The resulting report is an update to a similar report we published in 2014. The purpose of this study is really to provide an economic valuation of the natural resources in the Tampa Bay estuary and its surrounding watershed. We had two primary objectives going into this study. The first was to demonstrate the Tampa Bay's value as an economic, social, and environmental driver by identifying the contributions of the Bay to the regional economy and our overall well-being. And in doing so, we really hope that this final report will help to educate the public and policymakers, such as yourselves, on the importance of our natural resources. And the second objective was to establish a replicable process for performing evaluation of Tampa Bay using the best available data. So it's important to note that unlike the 2014 report, we did not use surveys for this. We thought there were too many assumptions we had to make, and it wasn't as defensible. And then this study estimated a snapshot of yearly value. And so we used economic data from 2019, adjusting it to 2022. And we made this decision due to the different market disruptions of the COVID-19 pandemic. We thought that wouldn't, because of those disruptions, we wouldn't really see the market as it typically operates. And then I also want to note that during this project, we had two stakeholder meetings, and we're going to have another one with the final report. And it was comprised of economists and environmental scientists from around the state, and they helped us to verify our methods and our results. And then they'll be doing a final read through of our last report. And so within this report, there are three kinds of value streams that we tried to capture. And we'll be going through these individually. But the first was the economic contributions, including the output, wages, and employment by Bay-related industry sectors. And we conducted an economic analysis to reveal that economic footprint. And we also estimated the impact of Bay proximity to property values. And we did that using a hedonic analysis. And then we know that the Bay's ecosystems provide other sources of value that are increasingly recognized in the literature. So we quantified three of those services, including carbon sequestration, denitrification, and shoreline protection services. And I just want to highlight that our study area corresponds with the boundaries of the watershed. So that includes parts of 6 counties. We only collected data from businesses within that watershed, within those zip codes within that watershed. So I'm going to hand it over to Harry. He's going to go through the first two of those three sort of value streams that we quantified in this report.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Alana. Again, I've been able to meet many of you, but for those who don't know me, my name is Harry Walsh, and I'm Economic Development Planner on staff. This has been a really stimulating project to work on. Both from what Alana was saying about replicability and open data sources, but also that we wanted to not just give you a number like the Bay is worth X billion dollars. We wanted to do a few different slices of value here. So the first one we're going to look at is called an industry footprint analysis. This is also called a contribution analysis, meaning what is that industry sector contributing to the overall region's economy? So there's three main types of contribution that we're looking at. There's direct contribution. This is in that industry sector, how many people are employed? What level of output is it producing? And from that output, what is it paying its workers and proprietors? That's all direct. Indirect has to do with up and downstream supply chain. So all of the purchases they have to make, the services they need, the technology they need, everything to produce that final output. So this also includes like shipping and logistics, warehousing, all of that sort of thing. Then the third you have is induced contributions. So you're paying people that are working in these sectors, and then that's becoming their personal income. So they're going and they're spending that as household spending. They're buying groceries, they're buying clothing, healthcare, recreation, all that other stuff. So all together is the total footprint or the total contribution of that industry sector. So based on NOAA's 2018 Blue Economy report, we selected 8 industry sectors. So each of these are made up of several industries. And the 8 are living resources, construction, marine transportation, mineral extraction, ship and boat building, tourism and recreation, research, and defense. So we're going to look at each of these, and then I'll kind of give a sum total at the end. And these are sorted by ascending amounts of total output in terms of their footprint. So starting with the first one, with about $1 billion in supported output, is ship and boat building. So this is both new vessels, like large freight vessels, new personal boats that people are buying, as well as maintenance, repair on all of the ships going around in the watershed, which obviously there is quite a bit of. The next is research, supporting about $1.2 billion in total footprint. And this is not all of the research going on in the watershed. There is quite a bit more than just what's being highlighted here. This is just research dealing with ecological and environmental impacts, things dealing with mitigation, storm recovery, all of that sort of thing. So something to do with the watershed itself. It was the constraints for this. Next is construction, supporting about $1.8 billion in total footprint, and same thing for research. Construction is absolutely a massive industry in our area, and so there are a lot more people than just this employed in this industry. This is just construction that has to do with the watershed in some way. This is building and maintaining bridges, building seawalls, adapting structures to deal with storm conditions and that sort of thing, something to do with the watershed again. Next is defense. So NOAA determined that the defense industry is dependent on water and watersheds, that because of strategic coastal locations, the military installations are placed where they are. And otherwise, if not for the estuary, they would be somewhere else or doing something different. And so this industry, it supports about $2.2 billion in total footprint. We obviously have MacDill Air Force Base, most notably, but we have several other military installations across the watershed. Next is living resources, supporting a footprint of about $2.9 billion in total output. So this is growing crops, this is fishing, this is aquaculture, this is logging, everything to do with the natural world and the resources that we get from it, aside from minerals, which we'll get to, but all of the living resources that we extract. Next is marine transportation. So separate from the actual building of the boats and ships, everything that those ships and boats are used for. So you have freight, bulk cargo transportation, also pleasure crafts, a bit of fishing, everything that people are doing with those vessels on the water, which obviously is quite a large industry with our 5 major ports in our watershed. Then mineral extraction, we wanted to include this in $3.4 billion in total footprint. We are geologically unique in the watershed. We're one of the few areas in the world that has a significant deposit of phosphates, phosphatic material, that is mostly used to make fertilizer. So we both extract phosphates and export that to the rest of the world, and then we also make the fertilizer within the watershed and export that as a final product. And that fertilizer is, in dollar terms, one of the region's largest exports out of the region. So again, for better or for worse, I can understand that some people have feelings on this, but we wanted to note it as something that is unique to the watershed. And then finally, as you might expect, tourism and recreation as a watershed dependent industry. So like I said, with research and a few of the other industries, total tourism and recreation employment is much larger than this. This is just, to the best of what we could determine, is dependent some way on the bay and the major tributaries. So while everything was limited to the watershed, in this case, this was also limited to just a a specific buffer, just those census tracts that were along the bay or the major tributaries. So it's in some way interacting with the water. We wanted to exclude something like, I live over in Tampa, if there's a little diner that is not on the water, doesn't get a lot of out of town folks, we didn't want to include that in tourism and recreation just because that's how our data source was looking. It had food and drinking places all together. So we did a little work to get a more conservative estimate of about $4.7 billion in total footprint. And then if you add all of those figures up, you get a total figure of $31.6 billion each year in total output supported by the watershed, and about 207,000 people. This works out to be just about 11%, or a little more than 1 in 10 jobs is dependent on the watershed, the estuary system. So then, aside from water's presence supporting all this economic activity I just outlined, water itself is an industrial input. So we weren't looking at personal usage of water, but specifically industry usages, which we had quite a bit of data on. So I was able to take a lot of this granular data and kind of collate it into the 5 major uses in terms of how many gallons per year they use, and give you a few figures on what that is actually worth. So the top 5, generally speaking, usages are cooling for electric power generation, crop irrigation, aquaculture, mining and quarrying, and fertilizer production. As I mentioned, we do quite a lot of that here. So you can look in the second column, and this is from that industry, or from that usage, producing $1 of output, how many cents of that is coming from the water? So as you can see, aquaculture, heavily dependent on water. But also electric power generation, we generate quite a bit of electricity. Most of it is fossil fuel generated. But one of the kind of interesting things, when you think electricity and water, you probably think hydroelectric. We don't really do too much of that in the watershed. But we do thermoelectric generation, which is a renewable source. And as you can see, about 1/3 of the total value of the electricity produced is coming from the water that's going through and cooling it. Generally speaking, this water comes in directly from the bay or groundwater, is that once through cooling and then goes right back into the water, just warmed up, cleaned and warmed up, generally speaking. Then from that, so looking at economic activity supported by the presence of water, water as an input to industrial uses, we then wanted to turn and look at some of the intangible aspects that the watershed is providing in terms of value. And one of those things is the premium that being near this beautiful water, being able to see it and interact with it daily adds to property values. So we had property appraiser data that included about 650,000 single family homes across the watershed. And so we first went through and we wanted to figure out a way to value just the amenity aspect of it. So one of the ways you can do this is called a hedonic analysis. The intuition is there's certain things that people like and don't like about properties that affects how they pay. So for example, you're probably not very likely to pay much for a house that does not have a working bathroom. Or if your property that's 300 or 3,000 square feet is going to be worth more than one that's 1,000 square feet, all else equal. So you can go through, and through an iterative process, we determined which parts of single family, which attributes, which elements of these single family properties contributed to their final appraised value and sale price. And so those were things like the age of the property, the square footage, the size of the land, any special features, the quality of the construction. All of that that contributes, as you might expect, to both appraised value and sale price. And then from that, if we include that in the analysis, we're controlling for it. So we can see how much do all of these factors contribute, and we can see that there are other contributors to value. So one of the things that we wanted to tease out was proximity. So what we did is we created a buffer. We put a 1/4 mile buffer between from the bay and the major tributaries. And we sorted all of those properties. So they were either within that 1/4 mile buffer or they were outside of that 1/4 mile buffer. And then we looked at what does that buffer have as an impact on the appraised value. And we found that all else equal, for a comparable single family home, being within a 1/4 mile of the water adds about $62,000 to the appraised value. In the final report, we also have some impact on sale price. It's a little bit more hazy because sale price is not quite as formulaic as appraised value is. But we had this value per property. And then if you take that and you multiply it by all of the single family properties that are within a quarter-mile buffer to the water, that is a total amenity value of $3.8 billion added each year. So with that, I'm going to thank you, and I'm going to turn it over to Alana to talk about ecosystem services.
So ecosystem services represent the direct and the indirect contributions that ecosystems make to our well-being. Most of those services don't produce marketed products, so their value is less visible. You don't see them in the markets. And so as a result, they're left out of cost-benefit analyses and decision-making, and consequently, they're assigned this implicit value of zero. So one way to make those goods and services more visible is to demonstrate their economic value or society's willingness to pay for those services and the benefits that they provide. So we attempted to quantify this value for 3 regulating ecosystem services provided by various coastal and upland habitats in the estuary, including carbon sequestration, denitrification, and the shoreline protection. I'm going to go over the results of 2 of those. We're still polishing up some of the results for the last one, the shoreline protection. So for the first one, we know estuarine and coastal ecosystems play an important role in regulating climate by sequestering carbon. They're among the most productive habitats for this service. So using the known carbon sequestration rates, we estimated the yearly sequestration of mangrove forests, of salt marshes, pine flatwoods, seagrasses, freshwater wetlands, and shrub and brushland habitats in the watershed. We found that together these habitats sequester nearly 600,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide every year, which when valued is approximately $52.3 million annually. Now, in addition to that, there is more than 60 million tons of carbon currently stored in the vegetation and soil of these habitats. And that's about equivalent to the annual emissions of 13.2 million cars. So if these habitats are eliminated, that carbon not only will be released into the atmosphere, whatever's stored in the vegetation and soil, but we'll also lose those yearly services that these habitats are providing. And we know that those are so important to the mitigation of climate change. And then so the other ecosystem service we captured in this report is the denitrification services. And that's another really important service provided by estuarine habitats. It's a natural water treatment. If these habitats are healthy, then they're really effective at removing nutrients such as nitrogen. Now, I just want to put a caveat out there that it's really important to remove nutrient pollution before it enters surface waters. And bay habitats are not a substitute for proper treatment for reducing your nutrient loading. But we do recognize their value in providing additional denitrification services if they're healthy and they're left intact, which should be reflected in evaluation. So in our analysis, we looked at mangrove forests, salt marshes, oyster bars, seagrasses, and freshwater wetlands for this service. And together, these habitats process approximately 16 million pounds of nitrogen each year in the Tampa Bay estuary. And that provides approximately 714.3 million worth of denitrification benefits. So these water quality improvements will continue each year if these habitats are left in place and if they're left healthy. Now, if they are degraded, they can actually contribute nutrients to the estuary. So it's really important that we make sure that they're protected and functioning to their, optimum capacity. So in summary for this report, the Tampa Bay estuary supports many leading industries and jobs in the region, and it's a key driver of our economy. We also see benefits beyond those that are directly contributing to the economy, resulting from other supporting and regulating services provided by the estuary's ecosystems. And restoration and protection efforts are needed to ensure that these natural resources thrive so that future generations can continue to benefit from them. So it's my hope that these methodologies we established in this report can be expanded upon in future iterations with more site-specific data to inform cost-benefit analyses and management and development decisions. And so we are right now hoping to release this report next month, probably at the end of the month. You can expect to see it. So thank you so much for this opportunity to share the results of this. If you have any questions, we're happy to take those now.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Harry. Yes.
I just wanted to say thank you for doing that study. I enjoyed it the second time. I did.
Thanks, Colleen.
Yeah, thank you. Of course.
Thank you, Colleen.
I just wanted to know if we can get a copy of this, but more importantly, the data that you shared at the beginning and slide was great. I would love to see all of that on one page.
Oh, absolutely. Sure.
Yes.
Yes.
Thinking about the port, very interesting information. I love you about that.
Yes, we do plan on developing like a one pager, like a policy brief.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, question about.
Yes. I was not trying to make any statement on for or against, just merely identifying what some of the largest industries are. And it is unique. We're one of the only places in the world that has these significant deposits, and we do quite a bit of it. You're familiar with Mosaic, that is, one of the major companies involved in extracting and processing into fertilizer. So this is just meant to be informational, but please do with it what you will. Mm-hmm.
It's not really something that we don't really weigh in on the global decisions about regulations. What we're trying to do is document the way that the natural resources contribute to the economic engine of the region. So, I kind of agree with what Harry has provided there. We're not trying to weigh in. We thought to be regulated, but they do generate value as a natural resource.
Okay. So, just so my understanding is that we do our industries that mine and sell it from here, but we are trying to limit it flowing back into the water. Are there appropriate alternatives for the function of those fertilizers in our world that aren't phosphates? And, do we have appropriate alternatives?
I think the challenge is there's trade-offs with almost any choice that we make and what we're trying to do. So fertilizers are pretty useful in terms of helping feed many parts of the world, and to provide that same nutrient load through other sources, there are other trade-offs that come along with that, whether it is other greenhouse gas emissions or additional use. Like it's not so easy as saying, is it yes? I'm sure there are other alternatives, but they come with other impacts as well. So that's
just to remind you you need to make part of Florida. Mining industry is part of the nitrogen management. We've shown through their activities that their impacts today they have indicates over time from the activity, but they are certainly contributor that requires compensation. The biggest improvements have been fertilizer exports back in the early 1990s. That was a significant sort of revenue to the bay. Some of their activities justified the growth covering conveyor belt shifts and the a long way. And then just there. So that doesn't say about what you might to what if they're trying to take this.
and then you have benefits for the environment and have benefits to their bottom line too.
If you go back to the input side of the thing, so we have all that economic impact that's profound. And then you've got the third bullet is protection and restoration. How much do we want to emphasize? I mean, that's where we need to sound the alarm, and I think maybe the engine presentation sometime is what are most vulnerable? What's going to feel the impact first out of all of those economic categories that we talked about? Because I fear that people see that and they see, oh my God, it's a great economic generator here. It's been coming along. It's always just going to come along. You know, it's so big enough. I don't really have to worry about it. Who's going to move the Causeway Bridge, right? So where are we going to let people know they're going to feel it first?
Right, and that's a great point of feedback. And, I think with our primary objective with this study is to establish this baseline of valuation methods, and then with the intention that, we're paving this way for the valuation work and others can build onto this and do subsequent studies. And I think that would absolutely be a logical next stepping stone.
In return, we're getting economic return from the different sectors. So it frames sort of the investments that were made, need to make in the future to protect those sectors. That's another big thing, another big change in terms of the ecosystem services that Lana just provided based on the loss of the secrets. We've lost all that value just from the loss of the habitats. And that just highlights the politically we see and services that lose and by that we otherwise have.
And so this gives us a replicable methodology where we could, provide those kinds of counter estimates of saying, this is the value of the bay, but when we lose, 4,000 acres of seagrass over a 2-year period, this is what it's costing you. We can use the same method to make those estimates so that we're speaking apples to apples.
This is really tourism, development, and valuation of property value. I serve on the board, Tampa Bay board too as well. And right now in Tampa Bay, we're just going through so much from extensions of river walks and really our commercial property or industrial property is kind of under attack in this county. The port needs the ability to move freight, as you all well know. It's a major issue, and we are the container ships are driving every time they come through Hillsborough County. How we have these components of more residential coming in, and the prospect of residential. We're not going to get into the Tampa Bay rates conversation here, but there's just so much changing right now. This is such a great study, but I think it's going to be really fluid moving forward. Probably one every year to have quite different numbers. So great work on this, and thank you for mentioning having some type of breakout. I would like to have that as well. So thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. And yes, we'll make sure everyone has that one-pager breakdown of everything. Thank you.
I took away as far as we're talking about communicating this to the public was that, and correct me if I got my number wrong, but the seagrasses, we didn't have the seagrass we have is 13 million cars added to the roads of Tampa Bay as far as pollution. That
Several more habitats than just seagrasses, and then that's in terms of carbon being stored in those habitats. And so if you eliminated all of those various habitats that I mentioned, which were mangrove forests, salt marshes, pine flatwoods, seagrasses, freshwater wetlands, and shrub and brushland habitats, then yes, theoretically, if those were lost tomorrow, that carbon would be released into the atmosphere, and that would be equivalent to the 13.2 million cars, their annual emissions.
And you talked about the $62,000 value of an average home increase by being a quarter mile from the water.
Yeah, within a quarter mile. Yep.
My memory from the study we did back in 2014 was that there was also a valuation of a clean and healthy bay. It wasn't just being by the water. you have a mucky water, your house value is very different than if you have clean water. Is that, you all get into that in the study?
So in this study, no, but that was part of our lit review, especially that was the paper Colleen mentioned I applied. So.
So all of the industry professionals about what the percentage of various industries and values could be allocated, could be attributed to a bay or an LP bay. So we can't get those same people in a room every 5 years to sort of break down the data in that way. And so it's not reproducible. And we're trying to be open and transparent in all the things we do. So the way that we're trying to get at that value question associated with a healthy bay is more its ecosystem services piece, or through follow-up reports that kind of then can compare to that baseline. So if we took a look at, say, the red tide event, or if we had another red tide event, we could look at property sales that occurred while a red tide event was going on. If that price premium decreases during a red tide, we could like do a one-off study that kind of shows compared to the baseline that's been missed. So it's much more defensible and reproducible, but those questions we have to ask and answer in a really specific way going forward. But I feel much more confident in the results that we share with the community.
I think it's just important as we communicate, not only to the general public, but to the industries that are non-traditional, environmentally concerned industries, developers, builders, and you get into the ones that should be, as we talk about recreation, fishing, and that type of boat builders and all those. So I think that's part of the conversation. Further questions or comments? Thank you all very much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have State of the Bay, seagrass habitat and water quality updates. Intro?
Yeah, this is the fourth curve that we provide to synthesize a lot of disparate data sources, shot while with overall report part updates on a yearly basis. So markets that carry going to go through some of the key indicators that we've developed in the past and some new ones that create some focus.
All right. Good morning, everybody. I'm Marcus Beck, the program scientist for the Estuary Program. I'll be co-presenting with Carrie Flaherty-Walia, our restoration ecologist. And as Ed mentioned, about this time every year, I have the privilege of basically telling you how the Bay is doing. I'm happy that we had that earlier discussion, so hopefully got a lot of that out of the way. But I'll be showing you basically some data to put some numbers to the trends that we've recently seen in the Bay. At your seat, you also have a 2-pager water quality report card. That is a product we also put out every year, so I'll be talking about some of the results of that, but trying to weave that into some of the other trends that we've seen with seagrasses and some of the other indicators. And feel free to ask questions while I go through this as well. So this is the state of seagrass in Tampa Bay. We have a flagship graphic like this that we put out every time we get an update to these numbers. This is based on coverage estimates provided to us from the Water Management District. And the trend is not good in the last couple of years. Basically, for the previous 3 reporting periods from 2018 to 2022, we've seen a dramatic loss in seagrasses, and that is basically contrasted to what we're calling the recovery of Tampa Bay in the previous couple of decades. So our success story is kind of turning around the other direction, and that's definitely not a good trend. This red line on the graph here, this is our coverage goal. So it was previously based on a acreage estimate for the 1950s period, our benchmark period, when we know that the Bay was kind of in a more pristine state. We exceeded that goal in 2014 and continued higher in 2016 when we reached a peak above 40,000 acres. And then in 2020, we said, let's up that because we're overachievers. And this is what we know we can achieve. So now our target is 40,000 acres. And at the same time that we increased our target for the whole Bay, we saw a decline in seagrasses. So again, not really the direction we want to be going. This animation shows us the trend over time. I thought it was particularly important to include this in this presentation because I think it really kind of hit you in the face what the changes are that we've been seeing. So you'll see, each bar obviously is a year where we have data. And on the left is basically the seagrasses in the bay. And you can see as we ramp up towards 2016, the seagrass getting fuller and fuller. And then from 2016 on, it just kind of goes away. It's still there, mind you, but we've seen a loss of about, I think, 38% since 2016. So definitely not a good trend. I'll let this run one more time as we kind of take this in. So that's the bay as a whole. The losses were not equal across the parts of the bay. Basically, where we saw the most losses were in the upper parts, where we have a lot of the freshwater inputs from the major tributaries to the bay. So in particular, Old Tampa Bay and Hillsborough Bay is where we saw a majority of the losses. These plots show the 4 major bay segments, Old Tampa Bay, Hillsborough Bay, Middle and Lower Tampa Bay. And these red lines show kind of there's no target for individual bay segments of seagrass coverage, but if we take the overall goal of 40,000 acres and kind of extrapolate it to the individual bay segments based on their areas and what we think they can achieve, it provides a reference line for us of where we think we could be if the seagrasses were in truly healthy condition. So basically, in most of the segments, we're departing from that line where we want to be. And in particular, like I said, Old Tampa Bay and Hillsborough Bay have seen the most losses. The other thing to note here is that the axes on these graphs are different. So Hillsborough Bay, it peaked out around 2,000 acres in 2016. Old Tampa Bay was upwards of, I think, like 11,000, 12,000 acres in 2016. So there's a lot more seagrasses in Old Tampa Bay compared to Hillsborough Bay. But if you look at the percent losses, it's Hillsborough Bay that was hit the hardest. So now we're down about 500 acres compared to about 2,000. So about a 75% loss in Hillsborough Bay compared to 2016. The other thing to note is that this was mentioned earlier. In 2022, the coverage estimate for Old Tampa Bay is now the lowest ever recorded since we've been documenting this in seagrasses. So not a good record to set, but that's just where we're at right now. I have another graphic showing just Old Tampa Bay, and I think this highlights where the changes have been most dramatic. So again, going up to our peak in 2016, you see it getting very, very full, particularly the Feather Sound region, and then just kind of crashing to where we are right now. Like I said, the Feather Sound region has kind of been an area where we have seen pretty large changes over the years.
Can you highlight that on?
Yep, right here, this little hump. So it's ephemeral, but when we have years with lots of seagrasses, that hump tends to be covered with Haliduli or shoalgrass. So we have seen a lot of losses there, a lot of seagrasses being replaced by macroalgae, which is also not a good trend. We're thinking there's some nutrient issues there with where the nutrients are going, and that speaks to some of the assimilative capacity studies that we are going to gear up towards doing. But yeah, pretty dramatic trends here. Yeah. So highlighting some of those changes in the upper bay, like I said, Old Tampa Bay, Hillsborough Bay, that's where we saw a lot of the losses. Some in Middle Tampa Bay. I actually should point out too that this is Middle Tampa Bay. Some losses here as well, particularly on the eastern side, possibly related to the issues in 2021 we had with the discharge releases from Piney Point. We can't say for certain, but there likely could be some changes there attributed to that. But that being said, the lower bay segments tend to remain relatively stable, which is good. That is not something that's unique to estuaries in particular, but these are areas where we've sort of held the line with seagrasses. So Boca Ciega Bay, Teresita Bay, Manatee River, as well as just Lower Tampa Bay that I showed in the other slide. So before I transition to the water quality report card, just want to pause and see if there are any comments or questions about the seagrasses as the number they're showing us. Yes.
How about the top 3 reasons why that's such a dramatic use?
The top 3 reasons, well, we talked about earlier, it's complicated in Old Tampa Bay. There's issues with tidal circulation, the impediments to the bridge, or the circulation for the bridges. There's still non-point source pollution, so stormwater runoff coming in there. We think that's a contributing factor. And climate change, possibly. I mean, there's temperature increases that are increasing the length of the growing season. Sea level rise associated with that, causing basically the light habitats to change. So it's a lot of it's a lot of things. And those, like I said, those are parts of the bay where, you know, that's where the water comes in as well. So they're going to be the direct recipients of the nutrients in the first place. So that's why we see, generally speaking, all things considered equal, where seagrasses are going to be most variable over time. Okay, so that's the bad news. The good news kind of is with water quality, and this is what makes the story kind of complicated, and why we need to sort of think about revisiting questions around what are appropriate targets and thresholds for parts of the bay. So the water quality report card at your seats there, just to remind everybody, this is something we'll put out every year. It kind of has our flagship stoplight graphics showing you trends over time in each of the major bay segments. But I want to remind everybody that there's sort of 2 different purposes for the different sides, right? So the first side is kind of the management-oriented graphic, stoplight graphics that is of more relevance to our management board or informing what our partners can do for getting different bay segments back on track. And then the right side is sort of the regulatory side. And this is what like the Nitrogen Management Consortium would be concerned about. So basically showing how the water quality varies as a function of the thresholds that are in place for the TMDL in Tampa Bay. So the good news is that for the first time in a while, about 7 or 8 years, all of our bay segments have, they scored a green essentially, which is sort of a stay the course type action for those bay segments. So green is good. Basically, we've met our targets for Old Tampa Bay, Hillsborough Bay, Middle Tampa Bay, Lower Tampa Bay, as in relation to chlorophyll concentrations, which is a measure of basically algae production in the water column, and light penetration. So how much light actually gets to the bottom as needed by seagrasses. So you'll see that in 2022, the annual averages are below those targets. So that's good news. For the last 7 or 8 years, all of the bay segments have been in green except Old Tampa Bay. That's sort of the problem child where we continue to have water quality issues related to circulation or algae blooms from pyridinium. So 2022 was kind of like a surprise to us. We weren't expecting to see that based on the trends that we've seen in the last 10 years.
Marcus, can you clarify when these results will exceed in relation to when the seagrass maps?
Right, so the water quality data is basically reflecting what was taken in 2022. There's sort of a 1-to-1 comparison between the results and the dates. The seagrass data is basically a year lagged. So it says 2022, but they do the flights the year prior, typically in the winter around December time period. So it takes them a year to process that information. So when we talk about 2022 seagrass results, that's actually a reflection of 2021 conditions. So a slight nuance there. So if water quality is good in 2022, that's basically the year after the dramatic decline that we saw in seagrasses, given that lag. So somewhat encouraging news here. I just wanted to highlight the stoplight graphic. This is kind of the management outcome, red, yellow, green graphic that we put out there. And so looking at Old Tampa Bay in this left column, you'll see that for 7 of the previous 8 years, it was given that yellow, so caution, essentially. This is an area of interest related to water quality issues that we know about, harmful algal blooms, and basically hasn't been meeting the targets in the preceding 7 years. I also want to highlight the trends, the long-term trends in our indicators. So chlorophyll, that's something we measure all the time and use it as an indicator of algae production in the water column. These are the long-term annual averages for each of the major base segments. And this obviously mirrors basically the long-term recovery of Tampa Bay, so a reduction in those concentrations as the water quality improved. But I want to draw your attention to a few things. So Old Tampa Bay, again, this is the problem child. These are where the concentrations were for the last 7 or 8 years, above our target, essentially, so, or the threshold in the target. So this is what was causing it to get that yellow category. If you look at the concentration in 2022, it's much lower. We're not entirely sure why that is the case for 2022, because it doesn't follow the trends preceding 2022. There could be some reasons for that. Maybe we missed key bloom events when the sampling occurred, but this is basically what's driving that green outcome for Old Tampa Bay. The other bays, pretty much the same trends, or other bay segments. The increase in Lower Tampa Bay chlorophyll concentration is something to take note of. It is trending in a direction that is not good. Looking at it by season is another way to break down the 2022 results. So this basically shows by each month the average chlorophyll concentration relative to the historical values. So the red points are 2022, and then the box plots and the smaller black points are all other observations going back to 1975. And what's interesting is in Old Tampa Bay, the previous years we've seen in August and September very high chlorophyll values, and that is related to the pyridinium blooms, the harmful algae blooms that we see recurring in Old Tampa Bay since about 2008. And we did see pyridinium in 2022. It's still there. It's not going away. But for whatever reason, when the water sampling occurred, it showed fairly low concentrations of chlorophyll, and the light attenuation was decent. The other thing to point out, and we like to highlight other events that have occurred of note each time we put out this report card, is that in Lower Tampa Bay in November, we did see red tide, so Karenia brevis coming in from the Gulf. That was picked up in the monitoring, obviously a concern, but nothing obviously like we had in 2021, but just something to note in terms of events that have happened in 2022. So that's basically seagrass water quality, kind of lukewarm news. Seagrass bad, water quality looking good in 2022. We are hopeful that the trends we've seen in 2022 will persist. That's obviously what we want. We want water quality to stay in the green, but we are cautiously optimistic. Just because we have 1 year of good results doesn't mean it's going to stay that way. We know water quality is highly variable. It depends on a lot of different factors that are influencing the condition of the bay. So we're not going to hold our breath. We'll see what next year looks like in terms of the water quality. Like I said, key events maybe were missed in the sampling that may be driving those concentrations to be lower. Whenever EPC of Hillsborough County goes out, it is a monthly sample at specific locations, but perhaps the algae blooms weren't picked up this year. That could be one explanation, but we're not really sure. But like I said, we're not going to sort of step back and say, oh, Old Tampa Bay is fixed. It's not. There's still algae blooms there. There's still the same issues with circulation. We need to be vigilant, especially in relation to the seagrass losses. And as was discussed before, one way of doing that is sort of understanding the nutrient diet, because basically the targets and thresholds that are in place today for Old Tampa Bay, as well as the other parts of the bay, were based on science and relationships from the 90s. So it might be time to revisit that because the ecology of the system has changed, and that could be one way to understand the problem. Obviously, as a program, our core mantra has been nitrogen load reductions as a way to maintain water quality and persist in an environment that's favorable for seagrasses. We're not departing from that at all. We know there's solid relationships between nutrient loads, water quality, seagrasses. That's been our paradigm all along. Stick to those, but are there things we can do now? Obviously, the nutrient diet, that's one thing to look at, but that's an analysis that will take a while. There are things that can be done now that were discussed earlier to address these issues. Stormwater controls, wastewater controls, getting the word out there, and just trying to reverse these trends before it's too late. We don't want to get to a place where we can't get back from. I think right now it's, action is needed immediately because it's been trending in a negative direction and we don't want to continue down that track. So.
Just to add to that point, it took us 30 years to reach that goal. It was 6 years to reach association for that seagrass coverage. How it will take us another decade to get back to where we want to be. So we need to work that alternative products to get where we want in terms of seagrass coverage. We think, but
Yeah, we don't want to undo the 30 years of progress that made this place so great in the first place. So, any questions before I hand it over to Carrie? All right, I appreciate it, everybody.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. At the estuary program, we're constantly looking for indicators that we can develop for bay health. So we have several of these indicators that are in development, and the two that I'm going to talk about next are faunal indicators. So basically animals that are dependent on the water quality and seagrass health within the bay. So the first one that I'm going to talk about is the Nekton index, and Nekton is, it could be called a fish index because it's mostly fish, but there are some macroinvertebrates included in this index, such as blue crabs, shrimp, other important invertebrates. This particular index is based off of sampling by the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. And as you all know, I'm a new employee of the estuary program. And prior to this, I worked for FWC and was a fish ecologist. So if you really want to go in depth on fish ecology, I can answer your questions. But just as far as a general Nekton index, basically this is based on a small net that's pulled within the bay system. It has small mesh, so it collects very small individuals. So resident fish or juvenile recreationally important species, such as juvenile snook, juvenile sea trout, things of that nature. And because they're small fish, they're very dependent on the habitat that they're in and very dependent on the water quality of these areas. So if there's seagrass declines, water quality declines, you can see that reflected in this Nekton index. So I want to point out that this time period only goes to 2021. It takes a little bit longer for these faunal indices to be processed. So just keep that in mind. This one and the benthic index I'm going to talk about only go through 2021. So if you look at this stoplight graphic, you can see that in 2021 we have a concerning trend. 3 out of the 4 bay segments are in the yellow, which is caution. That's something that's reflecting what's happening in the environment. To look at this a little bit more in depth, it's useful to look at it as a graphical representation, and these different lines represent each base segment over time, and the majority of the data is associated with the number of species that are caught on average. So a lot of this is species richness. And what you'll see is that, we're looking real good, and you'll see this, this one low point here in 2005. And those of you that were in the area in 2005, you know that there was an extensive red tide that year. Potentially worse than the one we had in 2021, but there wasn't as much social media around, so not documented as much. So you can see that sharp decline in the fish community. The good news about these small fish communities is they're relatively resilient to these red tide events. They have been happening historically over time. And you can see that over the next couple of years, the community bounces back and gets back into the green. And then if you keep moving along here, you'll see a little bit of a dip in 2018, where we also had a red tide event that happened within Southwest Florida, although that only went into the lower base segments here, so it wasn't quite as much of an impact. And then if you look at 2021, of course, this is the year that there were the discharges from Piney Point and also the extensive red tide that happened within the bay. So you see a decline in all of the bay segments there. So again, these are indicators that we can keep an eye on. They're an indication of what's actually happening in the bay, and it's supportive of what we're seeing in the water quality and seagrass indices. So taking these all together, we really have a complete story of how we can communicate what's happening within the bay. So the next index is based on benthic conditions and benthic organisms such as small crustaceans that live within the sediments. And this information is collected by EPC back a long period of time. So this is an index that reports on the health of this community in the sediments. And they're very sensitive to the pollutants that can be that are in those sediments. What you'll see here is that we've got a pretty consistent pattern of caution or on alert in the stoplight graphic here for both Old Tampa Bay and Hillsborough Bay, especially Hillsborough Bay, and it's very consistent with previous years. And a lot of this is based on the amount of contamination that's found in the sediments. So I do want to point out there is a brand new dashboard hot off the presses that Marcus put together yesterday and we checked out, where you can actually go to this website and you can actually look at individual contaminants and where they are spatially. So that's really an interesting thing to do. We'd like to do a little bit more with this indicator as well. So those are the two faunal indicators. And after this, I'm going to move into some habitat restoration numbers. So if there's any questions on either of those, I'll pause here. Okay. Yeah.
Before I would go to that, would you just do what are the maybe top 3 most common feedback?
That I would have to go do some research back into the dashboard. I don't know if you know offhand, Marcus.
So there's heavy metals, there's organic pesticides. Those are the big ones, but EPC measures about over 100 different contaminants. And that's kind of the tricky part with this is no one really has we don't have an intimate knowledge of each one of those contaminants and the issues they cause. EPC has a 25-year report where they synthesized data from 93 to 2017 that describes these results in a lot more detail. But the other one is legacy pesticides I mentioned earlier, like DDT, that's still in the sediments. And this is true for any location that has, like at any bay or estuary where there's a large river entering that system. You're going to see these contaminants. They're everywhere. And the fact that they were banned over 40, 50 years ago doesn't mean they're going to go away, and they still accumulate. So this benthic index is one way to assess how these contaminants are influencing the organisms that live in or near the sediments, is one piece of the bigger puzzle of what makes the bay healthy. So the other thing to mention is there are threshold levels for a lot of these contaminants. I don't want to get into the details of how they were derived, but it does provide some context in terms of what is a high or low concentration in terms of what would impact the organisms that live in the sediments. And you can look at that on the dashboard.
Yeah, because I was thinking, I mean, Hillsborough Bay is really the port. And, I mean, what went on at the port 50 years ago? Wild.
Yeah, the sediment tells no lies. So.
Yeah.
They're also in the depositional area.
All right, well, I'll go ahead and move on to some positive things that we're doing. So, one of the ways that we can get back some of these habitats that we're losing is through habitat restoration. And I'm just going to go through some numbers that we reported to every year we report the number of projects and the number of acres that we've restored along with our partners within the watershed. This is a voluntary reporting that our partners give us. And then we've taken these reported numbers and we divvied them up into the habitats that we're targeting for our habitat master plan. So we have specific targets for each one of these habitats that we want to meet. And for 2022, we had 39 projects. A lot of them, you can see up at the top there, are in the upland areas and a lot of the acreage there as well. We've also had a lot of restoration within oyster bars as well. Some of that is due to vertical oyster gardens as well. So we do have some progress within habitat restoration, and I just wanted to kind of put that in context with the last several years. So these are the number of projects from 2020 through 2022. We had a little bit less projects reported in 2022, but that could just be, when a project ends and that's when it's reported, variation in reporting. But as you can see, we're doing a good job here. We're restoring in multiple different habitats. A lot of that's uplands, which is good. So we can take these annual snapshots of what we're restoring on an annual basis, and we can look towards the future on which habitats we want to target for future restoration. So, if we're doing a lot of uplands restoration this year, maybe we want to concentrate on something else. So we can take this annual reporting, and we can also look at land use and land cover changes spatially over the bay as a whole. We use some Southwest Florida Water Management District mapping to do that. And we're trying to develop an overall report card for that as well. I'm not going to present it now because we're still kind of working out the kinks, but basically by using these annual summaries and looking at land use changes over time, because if you implement a project in 2022, you may not actually see that mapped that year. So using both of those, we can kind of take into consideration which habitats we want to concentrate on. So this is what we've come up with for 2022. We want to focus obviously on seagrass based on the results, and that's going to be nutrient load reductions, and then also focus on oyster restoration projects, salt marsh projects, and freshwater wetlands. Uplands are looking good. We want to protect the existing habitat and keep up what we're doing. And then also, just as a note, mangroves are doing well and they're expected to expand. There's been a lot of evidence over the past several years that mangroves are expanding northward due to increasing temperature and climate change. So mangroves are doing good. So this just gives you an idea of our priorities, over the next year, and we report. We work with our partners on that. And that is all we have for you. So if you have any questions about any of the parts of the presentation, we're here to answer them.
Questions? Very good. Thank you very much for your time today. Appreciate it.
One thing to add, so it's not just CRF. During restaurant the other areas where we develop 30 and 50
Well, I thought the graphic mapping of where we're spending our projects was very helpful to see where we are spending our money and time. So I think that was very helpful.
Just one other thing to add, if you're feeling overwhelmed with report cards, I hear you. We are thinking about a way to sort of roll it up into an overall index of Bay Health. There's pros and cons of doing that, but I still think it would be an incredibly useful tool. And that way, I think it would more easily help us pinpoint, what of all the indicators that we have for the Bay, what are the problem areas as a way for like more targeted assessments and management outcomes that would address the issues.
DEFCON list there.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. Only other thing on the agenda is information item, additional fact information. Maya, anything to add on that?
Just a couple things to call to your attention. There's the dashboard that summarizes all of the programs. You should be able to deeper into individual projects. If you want help on how to work that dashboard, schedule a time with me directly and I'm happy to walk through that with you. You'll see some individual reports on the Technical Advisory Committee and the Community Advisory Committee. All of the presentations and pertinent publications are linked in there, so also feel free to look at that. The big thing I want to call your attention to is the next meeting location in May. It has changed. We will not be meeting in this room. This room, the audiovisual equipment is being upgraded, so we will the Lillman Exchange. I have updated the address in the calendar invite, but I'll send out a follow-up with that location information as well.
Chair, we mentioned that statewide stormwater being published on the DEP website. Had it up on the screen. Yeah, they're still sharing. So there's an open comment period for public. Any additional nutrient load benefits that have to be garnered, any additional goals, there are things that I think the department would be receiving. Some of your entry, I've already provided some comments, but that's another opportunity for us all makers that storm that period to make your business an updated rule on February 3rd, so we receive.
Anything else that we can do or?
It's, we are committed to put on resilience, which has been a big, it's been a heavy lift. But the new, the administrators committed to that. I'm the commissioner is thrilled. We have been working on it and also the speaker. We're going to do 2 major steps. I'm just really thrilled about that. There. We're getting there, but those were big steps that have taken. And thank goodness for Bala to see.
Thank you very much.
My predecessor gave me certain people. Everybody here, little bit being seen it. I have all 3 days before the end of the year. With the good news, and let me for the record state that it's the equivalent of 99 pass and me full back to the fall of the end. He did all the work. I know a lot of you. So just wanted to thank you on behalf of Commissioner White for your help.
Anything else to go to the order? No.
The best way to access So in the calendar on the tdep.org website, there's a little link that says meeting materials, and it takes you into our Google Drive, and everything is there. I'm going to make sure that Mark and Harry's presentation is also shared in there as well.
If you're not doing anything tomorrow, 10 to 5 at Raymond Neary Park in Melbourne is the first ever honey festival. Please stop by. We are adjourned. Have a great weekend.